Shall we start?
Yes, sir. We are live.
Good evening, one and all. Namaskar, everyone. Today we are here to discuss about Naxalism in India and its impact, for that, we welcome our esteemed guest, Dr. Sri Om Prakash Ji, who is a professor with associate professor with National Law University, Jodhpur, and he had written books, papers. He had presented papers, and he was honored at Jawhat University as a fellow. And along with that, he won Eurasian fellowship, and he also came up with the Indian Institute of Social Science and Research to do research on Naxalism, and he's here to share his good insight with us. And myself, Srikanth, who will be the moderator for this session. And you guys, let's have discussion with Professor, and you can ask your questions at the end of the session. Thank you. Ayush. Namaskar, sir.
Yeah, namaskar. So thank you very much, Srikanji. Am I audible properly?
Yes, sir.
Okay, right. So I would like to thank National Reconstruction Society for giving this opportunity to interact on this very important public policy issue to a larger audience here. Let me just share my slides here, then I think I can begin it. Yeah, is it visible now? Is it visible? Whether the slides are visible?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Okay, right. So all of us will agree that among the various internal security threat which India is facing today, Naxalism is one of the biggest problem which the country is facing. And as per the estimate shows, the government estimate shows, every year we are spending more than 1,000 crore rupees to deal with this issue, deal with this problem. When we can see primarily the observation by the former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh regarding the extent of the problem which it is causing. He says Naxalism is the greatest internal security threat. And in 2014, when Prime Minister Modi came to power, that was one of his famous quotes, primarily to invoking the Naxalites to join the democratic path. And he says here, democracy has the best solutions for problems. Bombs, guns, and pistols can cause bloodshed. Let us make our earth green and not red. So that was really very important invocation, keeping in the light the problem which this very issue is posing to the nation state, Indian nation state. When we can see some of the early leadership of the Naxalism, primarily these three were considered as the troika of the Naxal leadership: Charu Majumdar, Kanu Sanyal, and Jangal Santhal. They were actually the founding, we can say, the founding fathers of the Naxal movement in India, where Charu Majumdar was like a brain, and Kanu Majumdar was for the organizational setup. Jangam Santhal meant for the, primarily mobilization of the masses for the purpose. So it was these three people, they have laid down the very foundation of the Naxal movement in 1967-68. That was a time when this movement primarily starts in India. So when we have to see the very origin of this problem, we have to see definitely the colonial legacy. because Naxalism is definitely a colonial legacy. And how it is a colonial legacy, that we can see because in 1793, the Jamindari system was introduced by the British in India. Lord Cornwallis, he introduced this permanent settlement of land revenue system. And that was primarily introduced to these regions like Bihar, Bengal, Odisha, Eastern UP region, where this system was introduced. And that exactly was the reason, primarily the Naxalbari was the reason, which was part of where actually the first glimmer of this movement began witness. So, so in that context, and Naxalbari that time was entirely underdeveloped region. 1967 when it emerged there. Primarily, it was the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes were the main population there, and they were all brutally exploited by the mafias and other exploiters class. So that gave birth to the rise of this movement in Naxalbari region. Strategically, also, this region was very, its location was very important. Primarily forested region, hilly tract were very, very convenient for the Naxals to begin their activity. And also it was geographically closer to China. So with that thing, we note that how the colonial legacy came in the post-independent India as a legacy. And then it gave birth to this movement in 1966, 67. When we see the prime reason in the post-independent India, the lopsided development which emerges due to the British policies, because they have just chosen some regions to develop, and large part of the India remained, underdeveloped. So this lopsided development is also a very important factor. When we see in the Naxalbari uprising in 1967, we primarily note this uprising was followed by a youth officers, or we can say youth officers was a very important part of this uprising. So 1967 to 71, that was primarily this 4 or 5 years is considered as a very important peak period of this movement. And the three states primarily, they were got infested by this movement. That was West Bengal, Bihar, Andhra Pradesh, and some part of Uttar Pradesh also. But primarily it was West Bengal, Bihar, and Andhra Pradesh, which witnessed the rise of this movement around this time. So this is called the first phase of this movement. And and during this time, we note the reason why the young people, the students primarily, they joined this movement. There were a number of reasons because very well-educated students from the medical colleges, engineering colleges, they joined this movement. The Presidency College of Calcutta, St. Stephen's College of Delhi University, and other universities, in fact, in the country. From there, the youths have joined the rank of this movement. The reason behind the students joining this movement was very obvious um, there was a frustration on the part of the education system, the development in the country, the sorry state of affairs which the economy was, and also the inability of the economy to create jobs, employment, in fact. So that was the prime reason why the students, they have joined the very rank of this movement during this time. And only in Calcutta, there were instances of almost 12,000 students getting arrested during this period. And most of them, in fact, they were very, very well educated, and primarily from these medical engineering colleges. So this was a very important aspect of this uprising of 1967-71. And then Charu Majumdar established this organization called CPIML, Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist. That was the organization was set up. So almost for 5 years, there was a condition of almost lawlessness. in these states, and virtually the government presence in several areas, vanished. Then the government, took the initiatives, in fact, and then this Operation Steeple Change was launched by the government of Mrs. Indira Gandhi in 1971. And then in a matter of, I think, almost 3 months' time, most of the Naxal leaders were either were arrested, they were put behind the bar. And in this way, this movement primarily was given a very jolt, in fact, great jolt by the state. And very next year, Charu Mazumdar was also arrested, and later on, in fact, in prison itself, he dies. So when we see this earlier part of this movement, we have to primarily see the ideology on which this is based upon, this movement is based upon, called Maoism. And Maoism is an ideology which is based upon the notion of fish in a pond. So here, fish are the Naxals, and the water in the pond are the common people. So naturally, the Mao invokes that if the Naxals have to survive, then the water must not dry. Means they will have to always find their security inside the people itself. And that is the best way from the part of the Indian state, that how to check the Naxalism. We have to dry the water. We have to dry the pond. Then primarily, in fact, Naxalism is a problem. Can be, can be addressed. This exactly the government is also doing, in fact, if you can see from the last several decades. So we will come to this part little later on. Today, if we can see this Naxal affected districts, if you can see the statistics of 2010, the districts were 220. But in a matter of 14 years' time, if you can see the current statistics, now the Naxal affected district has come down to 58. So this is a drastic fall down as far as the Naxal infested districts are concerned. And naturally, in the last 10 years, lot of effort has been done by the government to deal with the issue, and naturally the dividend is very, very obvious in front of us. We also note that today the Naxal outfit which exists in the country, known as the CPI Maoist, and it was a result of the merger of various Naxal outfits, Naxal organizations. In fact, some 20 years earlier, there were a number of Naxal organizations like PWG, like People's War Group, CPIML Liberation, CPIML Party Unity, MCC, Maoist Communist Center. So likewise, different organizations were there. So somehow there was a rethinking among them that these various organizations are not serving the purpose. So let us regroup. And in that way, they merged in 2004. And then the outfit which exists today is known as CPI Maoist. Now, if you can see the prime issue which are there in the underdeveloped areas, the areas where we can say there is a stride of the Naxal movements. So if you can see the demographic composition today, the SC and ST both comprise 25% of the Indian population. This is a very significant demography in fact. And as far as we note that these areas are known for the exploitation by the moneylenders, feudal elements, and the mafias. So one of the prime reason behind the spread of this movement definitely was the rampant grievances among these people from these exploiters class. Another factor we can see that since independence, on the name of large infrastructure project like construction of dams or construction of roads and other mining activities. Um, in fact, the recent statistics shows around 65 million people, as per the World Bank statistics shows. 65 million people were the project affected people. They got displaced due to these projects. And out of this, only 25% so far have been able to properly rehabilitate it. So this creates a huge human dimension, in fact, because what we know that almost 40 million people, 45 million people, they remain displaced, and this is a very chunk of the population, right? Which in fact lost everything, their identity, their culture, and that was the section, in fact, primarily from where the Naxals, they actually joined the ranks of the Naxal groups. Then another factor we note the forest issues, the way, in fact, for the tribal people, forest is like their mother. And when they are being forbidden or deprived of the forest products, naturally there is going to be a rise, because this problem we have seen in the British India also. The entire 18th and 19th century British India was full of tribal rebellions, full of the peasant rebellions. And these rebellions were primarily because of British interference into the tribal way of life. So the same lessons we have to learn, right? And this was actually when the India's travel policy was formed after independence. A lot of care we have taken, into those policy formulation. But somehow, as implementation part is concerned, we note that still there are a lot of things to be done. So, except the forest issue, we note there is insecure tenancy provision, limited employment opportunities, right? And also these factors like political marginalizations. In fact, very recently, the people in the Bastar and other regions, in fact, they were demanding the voting rights. So the political marginalization, illiteracy, human rights violation, they are also added factor which aggravates the crisis. Then overall, if you can see the condition of tribals today, the poor health and nutrition, and their loss of tribal rights and command over resources, these are some additional factors. And although there are several protective regulations, legislations for the purpose of protection of the tribals, but somehow, they have not been properly implemented, and due to which it's a case of administrative failure in that sense. There are more issues like grievances on the wages, equal wages for equal work for men and women, and better working conditions. These are some other related issues. The mining is a very important issue, especially in the tribal areas, for which there have been movements against the mining companies like Vedanta, Balco, and other companies, in fact. Then this tendu leaves and contractors is another important aspect, because traditionally the tribals have their rights over the tendu leaves, which is generally used for making this viri, or the rural cigarette, in fact, in the countryside areas of India. But even that right has been, they were divided off. Now the government is giving these tendu leaves to the contractors. So that adds further fuel into the fire. The alienation of the tribals primarily we can see equally from these factors. When we can come to the part on the Naxal funding, actually, this is a very important aspect, that throughout the country, they have almost more than 10,000 cadres. As for the different estimates, in fact, roughly around 10,000 cadres the Naxal have. And they get this funding from the variety of sources. So they are taking the these funds from the individuals as well as the business groups. This corporate nexus is very, very evident. In fact, the companies, those who have to work on those areas, the Naxal affected areas, now they will have to pay, in fact, the very hefty, you can say hafta, or that's a sort of uh, money to these groups. Otherwise, they won't be allowed to function there. So this corporate funding by the business groups is considered as a very important source from where the Naxals are getting this funding. Then there are several government schemes and works on which also they charge the levy when these schemes are being implemented on those areas. For example, the Narega schemes for the job, employment, security. Then this Pradhan Mantri Gram Swaraj Yojana, National Health Mission, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, all these government schemes, they are the central government funded schemes. And these schemes, when it is being implemented, somehow, they are also charging the cess from that. Then we note there are some other agencies also from where they are getting the funds, like the non-governmental agencies, for example, the contractors, road and civil construction contractors, those who own the bus and truck, in fact, petrol pumps, shopkeepers, they all are the party in this funding, and they have no other option but to do so because they have to survive the region. So due to this fear factor, this red terror, the reason they are born to pay the same. Even there are the several membership fees becomes a source of the national funding. So there are several supporters and sympathizers also. They also pay them money, and they also charge money, the revolutionary taxes, in fact, on the region. Then also the fines on the defaulters. But the biggest source of their funding is the narco cultivation, especially on the marijuana and opium. They actually pay them a very rich return, and that almost, we can say, almost 30 to 40% funding they get from this narco cultivation, especially in the region of Odisha, Jharkhand, some part. In these regions, in fact, this narco cultivation becomes an important source of their funding. Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, Jharkhand, they are the other states, in fact. Also, the instances of extortions we have seen, which they charge from the contractors. And as I just said, the cut from the developmental schemes. Even there are instances that they are involving into the bank robberies, in fact, right? So there is the estimate regarding their annual budget, which ranges to around 2,500 crore. And so this much funding they are able to generate annually. Now, how this fund are being utilized, there are primarily these three different categories we can see. Like they are paying the payment to the cadres, because as I just said, more than 10,000 cadres they have. Then they purchase advanced weaponry, in fact, arms procurement, advanced weaponries, and other modern IT equipments primarily. So that becomes another area, and the IT and propaganda becomes another category. So here these funds are basically they are utilized by these Naxal outfits, Naxal groups. When we can see on the part of the Naxal technological know-how, then sometimes it goes beyond our imagination that how much they have advanced in the technological know-how. One of the most popular thing which they use is IED, primarily to cause the blast, etc. And naturally, they have learned it from the outfits like LTT and some other groups in Myanmar, and organizations like even some ISI connection is also there as far as Naxals are concerned. Even they have some IT being, in fact. They actually use these Claymore landmines, which they have developed. And these Claymore landmines are generally connected with a camera flash gun, which they use primarily to make any blast. So, several years earlier, when the then Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu was attacked by using the same, and Jagannath Reddy, the other Chief Minister, was also attacked, in fact, by using these landmines. Even we know they have the knowledge of the interceptor of the wireless messages between the armed forces. So they developed this technique of even intercepting their messages and decoding it. We have also evidence of using by them the rocket launchers and advanced guns like guns of the AK series, AK-47, 56, Stain guns, likewise. So, seeing this technological know-how, it looks very important that they are far ahead in the technological know-how, and if the state will have to deal with that, then they will have to be one step ahead to them. When we see the nature of trends of Naxalism, we note there are serious instances of human rights violation by the Naxals. Almost every month we can hear some incident, some killings, in fact. Then we note there is also growth of anti-Maoist militias or caste senas. So since several decades, this trend we have witnessed, especially from the 1980s onwards, when Naxals were actually involved into the massacres of the high caste people. Then these high caste people, they have formed their own militia outfits. So Ranveer Sena was one of such organizations. Brahmarsi Sena, Ranveer Sena, Sunlight Army. Likewise, different senas, caste senas, in fact, with their form, primarily to deal with the, Maoist militias. And there is another trend we note, which is known as the Salwa Judum. So when we can see that not all the tribals are supporting the Naxals, because we have witnessed this Maoist and tribal conflict. Tribals are very much, lot of tribals are very much against interference in their culture and identity by the Naxals. And this has brought them the conflict with the Naxal groups. So that was the thing which led to the emergence of Salwar Judum here. So it was a rise within the tribal groups against the Naxal outfits. Salwar Judum literally means that the rise, among the tribal groups itself. And this Salwar Judum movement, which was supported by then Chhattisgarh government under Raman Singh. So he had started arming, these people in order to counter against the Maoists. And they were called as the SPOs, special police officers. But later on, the Salwar Judum movement has been termed as unethical, especially by the NHRC, National Human Rights Commission of India, and also by the Supreme Court of India, in fact. So, because the government here was supporting, so they just commanded the government to stop it, end it, because arming the civilians is going to create a completely anarchy and lawlessness. That was primarily their ground. And due to which the Salwar Judum movement, later on, the government was forced to stop its support and funding, in fact, for the same. We also note there is a drift now from the ideology. So when we can see the first, second phase of the Naxal movement, the ideology remained very, very center. But now ideology has almost gone on to the, we can say, footnotes, and they are using all illegal methods like extortion and illegal method of getting the funds. So in this way, even Kanu Sanyal, who died a few years earlier, he laments that now the Naxal movement have completely drifted from the stated goals and aims and objectives and ideology. So these are the photographs of the SPOs, special police officers, which are being armed by the state government in Chhattisgarh. So when we can see the trends of the Naxal violence, we have find there is a very significant decline since the last several years. And as I discussed earlier also, that how earlier there were 220 districts were affected by the Naxal violence, which has come down now to 58. So this graph further enforce the same, that if you can see the in this graph, there is a drastic reduction of the incident of killings of the security forces, civilians, right, everyone, and that shows that somehow Naxalism is getting tamed. Naxalism as a problem is getting contained, in fact, by the efforts of the government. Even this map is supporting the same, because this map belongs to the left side map belongs to 2007, and you can see here the red corridor here. The entire this red corridor um, on the east coast of India. Now this right map belongs to 2022, and this map shows that how drastically this red corridor is declining. Actually, it has declined, in fact, because naturally the Naxal affected district has come down. So this shows the success on the part of the government, central government, state government's efforts, combined efforts to contain this problem. So all these regions, like you can see the Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, some part of Bihar, West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, they are all part of this red corridor. Even the region like Gadchiroli in Maharashtra, in the last several years, it has emerged as one of the centers of the Naxal violence. So even this map here shows the same, primarily the incidence of the spread of the Naxal violence. Now come to the policies part. Policies in independent India, when India became independent, what type of policies the governments have adopted, primarily to deal with these agrarian um, problems. So we don't immediately after independence, the government of India passed this act called Abolition of Zamindari Act 1948, which was further modified in 1954. But these acts were hardly implemented because the sealing issue remains a challenge till date. Then we note that there was Bhudan movement was launched by Acharya Vinoba Bhave. He was a noted Gandhian. He launched this Bhudan movement. And this he started from the Naxal infested region of Telangana itself. And one of his famous slogan of this movement was "All land belongs to the God." So primarily, as we note that in this movement, millions of acres of the land were donated by the people, by the in fact, landlords. And these lands subsequently they were distributed among the people. So this Buddha movement, in that sense, was a great success. But it had some criticism also, like for example, sometime the land which were donated, since the title deed was not immediately given, so the donors later on or their descendants later on tend to snatch away the lands from the people. And likewise, but this Bhudan movement was a very important movement in the history of agrarian reforms in India. Um, Now, if you can see the recent time, the policy of emptying village is also one of the policy which government do. So in a village, it is expected that Naxals are using it as a hiding place. So the entire village is being emptied, and they are being sent into the camps. When we see the land reforms and governance and the application of these sealing lodge, we note it was not at all satisfactory, because this land reforms was done only in the West Bengal and Kerala, and to some extent in Jammu and Kashmir. In the rest part of the country, land reforms remains a failure. And this failure was primarily created on the part of the ruling elites, because they realized that they cannot dare to disenchant the upper caste people, in fact, those who were the land owning class. So due to which somehow there was a unwillingness to implement these policies, implement the land reforms policies, and which resulted into the spiraling grievances among the landless, among the people belonging to the lower strata. And this remains a issue and challenge till date. Then we note the police and security force reforms and modernization is another thing which the government have undertaken, but a lot of efforts are more to be required to be done in this area. The government has established several counter-insurgency and anti-terrorist schools. Like in Kanker in Maharashtra region and some other part, they have established this school primarily to train the paramilitary forces with the slogan that fight gorilla with the spirit of gorilla. If you have to fight the gorillas, you need to be trained in the jungle warfare and the way a gorilla has to be. So then we note coordinated center state action um, is also a factor which has brought the success, because without the state government's cooperation, this problem cannot be contained. When the central government is sending their troops like the BSF and other people, they require to have a proper coordination with the state police, because the state police, local police have the better know-how of the region. And that's why a proper coordination of the inter-state action is very, very important. Sometime when an operation fails due to this lack of coordination itself. Then we note in the recent time, government have also gone for the surrender and rehabilitation policy for the Naxalites. So a lot of Naxalites, those who got disenchanted from their cadres, those who want to surrender, they have been surrendering to the government before the police, but they require more and more incentives so that more and more people should join the surrendering process. Some of the state government has come out with the surrender and rehabilitation policy. For example, in Jharkhand and Andhra Pradesh, these are the two states. They have come out with a policy of those militants, those who are surrendering, what incentive they are going to get. For example, giving them monthly allowances for some time and a fixed sum so that they can set up their own business enterprise. Also, the insurance policies for them, right? Providing benefits to their kids, educational facilities and other facilities to the kids. So likewise, such rehabilitation package is required as part of this policy, which some government, in fact, state government have tried, but other states also have to follow the suit, because the entire Eastern Coast Corridor, every state has to go for the same policy, which is going to be important incentive for the Naxals uh, to surrender before the government. Then development of physical infrastructure, especially the roads running into the area. Naxals are very much against that. They don't want the government to reach to their areas, and that's why they are against that. But still, the government is doing this, developing the roads, so that at the time of operations, the security forces could reach on a faster mode. Then we note one of the policies called BDI, or the Backward District Initiative. So this Backward District Initiative primarily means here that those districts which are the Naxal affected, they will get a central government grant of rupees 15 crore every year for 3 years time. And this money they are going to use primarily on the development of social infrastructure and physical infrastructure also. So primarily on the issue of health, on the issue of education, establishment of schools, etc. This money to be used also for the construction of roads, etc. This money could be used. So this is a good scheme because the impact of these policies has been felt, and that's why today, if Naxalism is moving towards a little decline, somehow this policy have a important impact. Then in year 2006, this Forest Dwellers Act was passed, which recognizes the tribals' rights over the forest, forest produce. So although very late, but at least by this legislation, it has legitimized the tribals' rights over the forest goods and produce. But now the challenge is implementation, and whether also awareness is required for the tribals. So this is again a welcome step on the part of the government. Meaningful negotiation and dialogue, because there has to be a policy of both carrot and stick approach. Meaningful negotiation and dialogue is also required. You have to bring them on the the table for the dialogue, and these governments have been doing, in fact. So this process also has to continue along with the use of the forces. Implementation of the development schemes by the central government, we have just talked about that. And the socio-economic development of the affected area is really very, very important, which the governments are also taking care of. In the constitution, there is a provision of a tribal advisory council. So this tribal advisory council primarily advises the central government to take measures which a particular tribal area requires. So this tribal advisory council has not properly worked. There is a need to primarily rope into that so that it should work effectively. And there is also need for strengthening the intelligence network. Judicial system is required to be responsive. It means that when the cases are there in front of judiciary and there are delays, in fact, into the delivering of the justice, naturally, sometimes people resort to go to the Jan Adalats, which the Naxalites, in fact, they are running. So in that way, there has to be a responsive judicial system which could deal with the problems, in fact, effectively without taking much time. And effective border management is also being done by the government, but little more effort privately is required. There have been instances of extension of Panchayati Raj institutions on those areas, especially the tribal areas, because this is a millenniums old institution which the country has witnessed. So if these Panchayati Raj institutions will be extended, then naturally the local disputes can be tackled, in fact, at the local level itself without actually reaching to the court, etc. So this is again important area on which government is trying, but probably more effort is required to be done. Social policing is another important concept. There has to be a coordinated approach between the government and the police forces. The perception about the police from the point of view of the citizens has to be changed. And in this way, only the civilians are going to help the police. Because if the civilians will fear from the police forces, then it's not going to help. That's why social policing is a novel concept, which government has come out. But again, there has to be a proper training to the police forces, how to coordinate for the same. The mass media propaganda is also going to be very important because the people has to be shown that there is nothing could be achieved by violence. Violence can serve no purpose. And what schemes the government is actually doing, how it's going to better the life of the people, how it's bettering the life of the people, in fact. So such planned propaganda activity through the mass media is again a very important aspect, which government should make more and more effort on that count. And that's why I said there has to be a perception management campaign regarding this. Perception regarding what government is doing, why people should not go against the government, because government is doing great for their life, for improving their life. So this perception management campaign in that sense is really going to be very, very significant. And it's working, but probably, we have to do more and more, work on this count. There is also required to target the sources of the Naxal funding. The Naxal funding, which they are annually going to collect 2,500 crore, this has to be dried out. And that's why any instances of the money laundering or the narcotic cultivation and other sources, it has to be contained. So once the sources of funding will be stopped, naturally um, their activities will also cease to exist. And then the extension of the development schemes like Bharat Nirman, Narega, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, midday meal scheme. In fact, among all these schemes, what I noticed myself, that this Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana has really worked wonderfully. This is a central works scheme, and today you go to any of the countryside area in any part of India, you will find the rural roads are much better than the roads in the urban centers. The reason is that under this scheme, the contractor which is making the road, they also have to maintain it for the 5 years time. So this has made this scheme very, very effective, and this impact I think you can find felt by the rural people. So the schemes like this should be extended. Then definitely it's going to be of great use. And as I just said, there has to be a responsive judicial system versus the Jan Adalats, which are being run by the Naxalites to give speedy justice, and in which primarily they always use the brutal methods of beheading and other things like. So schools, health centers, they are going to be the new devices by which, if it can be extended, then it's going to definitely contain the Naxal problem. One experiment which Bangladesh have done, in fact, Bangladesh currently is going through a serious crisis, but Muhammad Yunus, who is made now who is heading the state now in this anarchic time, it was his credit for which even he got the Nobel Prize. This effective credit transfer scheme primarily, in fact, he brought out. This again, I think, if it can be effectively done here, primarily for the purpose of giving loans to the people in these areas, and creation of these self-help groups, then they will not look towards the government for the employment. They will stand on their own feet by setting up such self-employment schemes, etc. Then also the legal aid is a new novel concept. Even here in our university, we have adopted the same. In fact, we have adopted here a village, nearby village called Surpura, and we are giving our students and teachers, they are giving the legal aid to the people of this village. So likewise, this legal aid concept also should be extended to these areas where the um, legal professionals should provide aid and assistance to the people in these areas. And you see, one of the crux of the existing policy is Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, which the current government undertakes. So I think that is something which is very, very significant to note. Uh, I have done a major project on Naxalism funded by ICSSR, and some of my field survey findings here I would like to share. In fact, I've done this survey in the Chhattisgarh region and Jharkhand region. So it was a 2 years project. So in these findings, I just would like to share here the 2-3 questions. The first question was that do you have confidence in the elected government in India? So here, out of the respondents, around 260 says that yes, and no 59 can say 68. So majority of the people, those who were interviewed by us, they in fact showed their confidence in the elected form of government. That shows that somehow people are aligning with the, or we can say alienating with from the Naxal groups, in fact. Second question further proves the same. What is the way to resolve the conflict? And most of them, 282, say that peaceful means and negotiation with the government. Violent means, because what we find, there that there were 3 categories of the people we identified: those who were anti-Naxals, those who were pro-Naxals, those who were neutral. So that's why you can find the 3 different types of responses here. And one last question: do you think Naxal's policy of violence is proper? So here again, around 260 people says no, while 44 says yes. So it is these people, those who say yes, they are actually the sympathizers of the Naxals, right? But you can see here in all the 3 instances, majority of the people interviewed, they primarily says that these policies are not good, violence is not good, and only we can achieve the better results by, by aligning with the government, by the going to the government policies. So these things I just thought to share as part of our field survey, as part of this project. And these are some publications I did, my publications primarily for the audience. So one is on the National Human Rights Commission Journal. Then the second one is on a journal called Third Concept. And 2 of the articles like funding patterns and use of technology was in the proceedings of Indian History Congress. So they are available on the JS Tour. In fact, our audience can read that. So in that way, I think I come to this conclusion part by saying that Naxalism, in that sense, is a very important threat perception for the Indian government, but there are winds of change, and how this is gradually declining. There are declining trends, but we should there is required to have a continuous follow-up, because primarily in the last 10 years we find this sort of decline we have witnessed due to the effective implementation of in fact, government is pumping a lot of money in those areas, primarily to improve the healthcare and education system and other things. So naturally, due to which the people got alienated from the Naxal outfits. So that is my conclusion primarily here in the end, that future of Naxalism looks bleak here, and the more and more governmental effort, more and more effort by the civil society, NGOs, And the academia, in fact, also can play important role in containing this problem. So I think with this, I stop here and probably I look forward some interactions from the audience.
Hello, sir. Thank you. And thank you for your presentation, sir. Now we have questions. One question by just a minute. One question by Mr. Pradeep Kapoor, where he said that what are all the external factors? That is, for example, he's asking how China is supporting this kind of movement in India by cash or by its kind or weapon or psychological ops. How foreign governments are supporting this kind of movement in India? That is this Naxal movement. How they are getting support from? Is there any foreign hand behind their activities and things as such? It's his question, sir.
Right, right. So in fact, we come across that there are several external agencies, those who are actually supporting these Naxal problems, like the hand of ISI of Pakistan is very, very obvious. In fact, ISI of Pakistan's hand has been noted from the last more than 20 years' time. In fact, the way they are funding also these outfits. The Chinese connection was always there since the beginning. In fact, in 1967, when this uprising took place, the People's Daily newspaper in China, in fact, has brought out this editorial. So in fact, the Chinese ideological support by their logistics is always there, and most of the weaponry which they are getting, in fact, from um, Chinese sources itself, because uh, so in that sense, we can see the external agencies, even the these militias from Assam region, Myanmar region. In fact, they also have the connections. In fact, with ISI, LTT had a very important connection, but now LTT is extinct. But when it was surviving, it was the LTT, those who were training the Naxals, in fact, in the form making this IEDs, in fact. So in that sense, we note that that connection is always there, and still today this connection is there very much.
And sir, second question, it is about the paramilitary that is about a militia created by militia like Salva Judum and Ranveer Sena. And there is a question by one of our viewer is that whether Salva Judum or Ranveer Sena did any atrocity against the depressed group of people or something like that as stated in Wikipedia. Is it for sure? Have they did anything violence instead of fighting against this group? I mean, Naxals or something like that. It is a question by one of our viewer. You please.
Yeah, in fact, the very reason why these caste senas came into existence, it was like a reaction against the Naxal violence. So when the Naxals started targeting the landlord class, in fact, then naturally these senas came into existence, like the Ranveer Sena, Kurmi Sena, Kayas Sena, Brahmarshi Sena, in fact. And we note there were instances of killings and counter killings from both the sides, in fact, for the same. There have been several such, massacres like the Gaya massacre, Bara massacre, in fact, in Gaya region, and other part, in fact, in Bihar and other regions. So these massacres where the high caste people were getting killed, in fact. So that was the reaction, in fact, due to which these senas, more and more such senas came into existence. Uh, so that is very obvious, in fact, and even later on, the Ranveer Sena founder, ultimately he was in fact assassinated uh, by the Naxal outfits. So these sort of killings and counter killings, it was very much part of the culture. But now somehow, if you can see in a recent time, there looks like a sort of calm on this count. We have not found much reported incident, except somewhere they have primarily they are targeting the security forces only, not the civilians more.
Sir, one more question. That is from my side. Because in 1948, while I'm reading through End of an Era, book by Sri K.M. Munshi, that is when he was agent general to Hyderabad, where political integration of Hyderabad was in course. During the course of time, he was writing that the some of the sympathizers in Telugu speaking area of Madras presidency, that is today's Andhra Pradesh, they were in favor of communist movements in Telangana. Even Sri K.M. Munshi warned the government by that time during 1948, by the beginning of January or February, I think. The Student Federation of South and Southeast Asia, they met together in Kolkata, where they had some discussion, which led to spillover of communist movement in entire Southeast Asia and even in India too. So, does the at that same time in the way of resisting Nizam, communists have been occupying villages in Telangana, which were supported by the Andhra Pradesh, that is the Madras Presidency Telugu-speaking districts, supporting them. Have it led to Naxal movement to get deep root in the forests of Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and those Dandaga forest area? Has it been a
Yeah,
possibility?
yeah. I think this Telangana, which has become a state only in 2000, I think this movement is a much older one. You have rightly said here that this movement we can trace from 1940s, in fact, only, and there was always a demand, in fact. So the rise of the extreme communist, in fact, during this time, and even when Acharya Vinod Bhave, he started his Bhudan movement from Pachampalli region, in fact, in Telangana region. So that time, the people, those who were going along him, they all were fearing that how we should go to that area, because this area is very much, Naxal infested region. But Vinod Bhave, in fact, invoked them, and then all of them, in fact, went there. And then they have started this, Bhudan movement. And then naturally, the people, in fact, also supported the cause. So naturally, this Telangana today, when we are seeing this as a hotbed of Naxalism, it has a very long history, in fact, getting affected by the extreme communist sentiments. Primarily, this region have been always underdeveloped, in fact, highly underdeveloped, having the presence of the rural caste, rural tribes people, in fact, and they have been brutally exploited by these mafias and other groups. So naturally, they actually sided with the communist groups. So that was primarily the reason. Yeah, you rightly said. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And one more question, sir. Let me ask Parish before. And one more question, sir. Actually, the thing is, in order to curb the Naxalism, so far government did a good job. Since 2010 to 2024, we have reduced so many districts, and things as such, the developments are coming. And now it makes me feel that because if financial and oppression is for real, it would have happened in 1700s or 1600s itself. People would have rebelled against the then landlords or then people or anyone for that matter. But the issue is this rebellion was really nascent in 1900s only by British policies as such. Now, what we are doing is we are simply giving tribals back their rights, that is their rights in forest or their tegi leaves and things as such, and we are giving them the and we are helping villages to develop by themselves in sustainable way. These were system of existence. And why government took it so long, though government said they are practicing socialism, but instead of implementing it right, where the policy paralysis went, sir, from 1948 to 67, how such a policy paralysis, where such a policy paralysis started? That's my question, sir.
Yeah, that was the worst time because you see, from the 1947 onwards, we note that there were food riots throughout the country. Country was not food sufficient, and there was a great demand of the food stuff. So we are importing the food from America on PL 480 basis. So this continued till 1970, when the Green Revolution actually took place. Then somehow it brought the India gradually towards the self-dependent on the food grains production. But primarily that was the biggest challenge, because somehow we can blame the colonialism also. The legacy of colonialism also have an important impact. But those 20 years time, those regions were not properly fed by the government. So naturally, due to which we note that those regions further become, the dreaded center of the agrarian violence, in fact. So naturally, the policy paralysis, you can find, you rightly use the term. And since 1971, those 3 months time when the Naxal movement was in fact suppressed, But we note that again in 1980s, it started resurging, in fact, because somehow the people conditions were not addressed. In fact, the people's, that sort of discrimination, the big income gap, in fact, though that further brought this problem to the fore. And in the last 10 years, as I said, 10, 15 years time, we note that this problem was, as I said, because government is pumping a lot of money in these areas. So which is really, people are realizing that this is bettering their life. So why to go to the side of the violence? That sort of violence culture, right? So that perception has changed, is changing. That's why the water is not drying. Fish is in fact going to die definitely. In fact, this is my conjecture.
Yes, sir.
I
And
have one question.
yeah.
Should I ask?
Yes. Please.
Namaste, both of you. This is Adarsh on the other side. So I have a question: ki how does and how how much these communists back the Naxalites? For example, we have seen circulars, right? They have been celebrating the attacks on Indian army by Naxalites over several decades, and we have seen also we have seen burning of the effigies of photos of Brahmeshwar Mukhia, the one who founded the Ranveer Sena. So there have been a soft side in these communists for Naxalites. So are these are there the communist parties funding these movements, or how are they backing? So this is my question.
Yeah, see, actually the CPIML, which came out, it came out from the CPM itself, Communist Party of India, Marxist itself, because the Communist Party, they chose the path of the parliamentary politics, and this group, they were disenchanted by the parliamentary politics. That's why they took the path of the violence and the gun culture, right? So that brought the fundamental difference. See, even inside the communists, there are two different groups, CPI and CPM. One is supporting the Chinese version of communism, another is supporting the Russian version of communism. In fact, right? So even they had their internal divide, but this Naxalism as a group, in fact, they took a completely different path, which communists otherwise they don't support. But you can find definitely the sympathy is there, for the Naxal outfits, definitely, because especially for the people, those who are actually suffering in the hand of the, extremist groups, even the exploiter class, in fact. So, although the communist parties, they don't support the violence, in fact, right, cult of bomb and revolver, but you can find some sort of sympathy definitely is there. And ideologically, in fact, that sort of linkages we can see. And that's why in the recent time we have heard the term like urban Naxalism, in fact, right, is coming out. When the academia, some people, in fact, they are having sympathy with the Naxals groups. In fact, primarily they are coming as a reliever for these people, those who are getting exploited, right? So in that way, primarily we can say, yeah, that sort of linkages.
Thank you so much for answering the question.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any more questions?
So I do have a question. So let me ask the last question of this session. So
Yeah.
why is there so much obsession with the Naxalite? Because sir, I live in in the state of Jharkhand, and our Chief Minister Hemant Soren, who comes from the JMM party, condemns the arrest of Father Stan, who was the popular Naxal figure. So sir, Father Stan was portrayed as if he is the Masiha for the tribals. So sir, what are your view on this?
Yeah, that's why I say the region where Naxalism is very much entrenched, like Jharkhand is one of them, Chhattisgarh is another region, Telangana is another region. So there, naturally, you will find the political class, the ruling political class, have a sympathy with them. And because the Naxals have influence on the large part of the civil caste, civil tribes vote, in fact. So it is a vote bank which is a prime factor, because in an election, winnability becomes a very important factor. So that is the prime factor. We note that why sometimes these ruling class people, they have been somehow supporting the cause. Even we have find Lalu Prasad Yadav sometime earlier, he was also supporting the Naxals, primarily because the Naxals have the influence among the people, right? Those who can be the important vote bank, in fact. And even there are instances of even funding by the politicians to the Naxal outfits. But there is no but there have been certain media reports, in fact, that there might be, that linkages, in fact, between the politicians and the Naxals outfits, in fact. So that is the prime thing, I think, yeah.
Any further questions?
Thank you, sir.
Ayush, any further questions?
Sir, I don't think so.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, Ayush. Yep. Shall we have a vote of thanks?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And yeah, I thank you all members who visited here for this informative conversation which happened between Dr. Om Prakash ji, and thank you Ayush for organizing such a wonderful session to
Thank you,
understand
sir.
about the major issue which is happening in and around India for decades. And I thank you all who attended it and listened and asked your questions for the enlightenment on this particular issue. I thank you all, and let's meet in some other good session. Thank you, Ayush. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much,
Again.
Thank you,
Ayush.
sir. Thank you, Shrikant, sir.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much, Ayush, Shrikant ji, and Rajiv ji. In fact, due to your coordination and support, I am here on this forum. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Jai Hind. Let's.
Jai Hind. Jai Hind.
Yeah.
Jai.